Okay, it's day 124, part 4. And on my way down from Montreal, I was stopped in New York, and I was going to head to Washington, D.C. the next day, but I got kind of sidetracked in Long Island Sound. Um, I met with someone who wanted to research the murder of these girls that would have been killed by the Long Island serial killer. Now, what this young lady told me was some of the victims, I think it was 11 victims of the bodies found out there, were some of her friends. So, that's the background of this story. Shannan Gilbert was one of those people. I don't know if she was a friend of this person I met or not, but the mother of this person killed in 2012 also had recently died in late or in the summer of 2016. So it's something that I had talked about with the Council on Foreign Relations about bringing these people in from construction, CCC, CCCC, kind of almost a ritualistic killing after kind of providing these girls as entertainment. All these girls had come from, this is all just Shannan Gilbert, but all these girls had come from New York. They'd been kind of lured into the city of New York and then lured out to Long Island. So this was day 168. Now, interestingly enough, if you do a search on George Webb, day 168, all my videos, again, are gone. Which is very interesting. The only one that is out there is one that's left by this person called The Silentist that made a video. I'll just play it briefly.
Okay, day 168, Long Island Sound near Jones Beach. I've talked in previous episodes about the Long Island serial killer, and I was in Suffolk County, along the coast there, along where Gilgo Beach and Oak Beach and so forth, and visited a lot of the sites. And some of the bodies, or one of the bodies at least, was found down here near Jones Beach in Nassau County. There's a couple of really good web researchers, and I thought some of those tools might be good to mention for our search. Web Sleuths was one of the methodologies. So it was actually, what we're doing here with the Wan Brothers investigation actually was first done with these web sleuths and this guy who does Brain Scratch, or Brain Scratch or something like that, a guy named John, I can't remember his last name right now. But the case, if you're not familiar with it, was this: they found this Shannan Gilbert and all sorts of anomalies. She has a driver take her to the John's house, and then she at midnight from New York City, and then she's running from the house to house at 5 a.m. She makes all these 911 calls, 23 minutes long. For some reason, the New York State Police and 911 system can't geolocate her, but anyway, they start looking for her body, and they can't find it, and then they find 5 or 6 other bodies in burlap sacks. And I have long contended that the folks involved were in the rice business, and those were basmati burlap sacks. There is a large, well, I won't say the population here, but there's a large Middle Eastern population here, and I do believe those people were involved in the murders, and the burlap sacks were basmati rice sacks. Now, for some reason, the Suffolk County Police Department didn't want to talk about where the burlap sacks were from. All the bodies were found in those sacks. That's the common linking element. If somebody worked at a basmati rice factory, and I won't say exactly which one I believe it is, but I'll just say that I believe the port of entry was Montreal. I'll just say that at this point right now. Why wouldn't they release that fact? Why wouldn't they release a picture of the basmati rice sack, burlap sacks that were used in the crime? Why withhold that information? That actually is the smoking gun to where the person, the Long Island serial killer, works. And we're talking about at least 10 people, young women murdered, that were in the escort business for the most part, but I believe some were just at parties and drugged. Very upscale, Great Gatsby type parties, but some were doing individual calls like Shannan Gilbert was. But the Suffolk Police Department, I believe, was involved in acting as a pimp for national political figures, and that members of federal law enforcement, I'll repeat, members of federal law enforcement were using the Suffolk County Police Department as a sort of pimping service. A lot has come out with the Shannon Gilbert case. I believe the mother was murdered. Just a lot of odd situations regarding the case. But again, why not release the Basmati rice burlap sack, a picture of it, so people can place where the killer may have had access. At least place the killer with the cell phone records for where they might have been near a rice factory or ordered Amazon basmati rice over the internet, etc. So, sorry this is a little bit long, but this is a case that long has had a lot of questions about how the police have proceeded, and there's a lot of obvious.
And so one of the things I don't say in this video is I do believe I went to a couple of different factories. I won't say where, but I do believe they may have come from Canada, and I believe the killers may have come down from Canada. And I won't say much more than that at this point, but I will say this. I was very convinced that the entertainment services that were provided here were for Middle Eastern figures, very wealthy folks that had recently attended Council on Foreign Relations meetings. So, be that as it may, I would love to get my day 168s back. I'm going to steal my video back from the Silentist here. And just to say on 169, the other piece that happens, I at that point was saying I believe there's a connection between the information going to Brooklyn and Hillary for America and the Awans in D.C. So it was back then when I made that connection, and I was heading to D.C. the next day, and here's a little bit of that.
Awan Brotherhood heading to Washington, D.C. today, and I'm looking for everybody to help me as much as possible to get me interviews or meetings, coffee meetings with journalists in the Washington, D.C. area. I would especially like to meet Ray McGovern. He's been in...
And so I won't go through the whole thing, but I end up meeting with Lee Stranahan and so forth. And you can see I've already got the basmati rice connection, and I already had identified a number of different places that use that type of burlap bag. But anyway, the same day, Imran Awan makes this backup. This is the John Wilkes phone booth incident where this is thrown in the phone booth. Now, was this really that situation? Did Imran Awan, was he really in the country? Did he really throw it in the John Wilkes phone booth that day as I'm heading to Washington with the hard drives? Or was it really earlier when they left on the 7th after the DHS hack broke? Wasn't it really that day that it happened, and the Capitol Police were just throwing this in the John Wilkes phone booth to make it look like, hey, all this crime didn't happen underneath our noses? Isn't that really what happened? We don't really know until we get the police reports and we can make heads or tails of it. But it sounds like, with the forethought of a note going in saying attorney-client privilege, I don't think thieves actually have that presence of mind when they're in a hurry trying to make a break for it. They don't write attorney-client privilege on everything with a magic marker. So we'll see how that develops. I'll be quite honest, the person I met was a very young woman. She's 28. We did have a relationship that evening. She met me and said she followed me on the internet, and she leaned over and gave me a big kiss to start the evening. I barely got 2 words out, and I was sitting back almost thinking about blowing my rape whistle, but somehow I was able to stifle that instinct. And I do want to be full disclosure here, I did have a relationship with that woman.